Hi everyone, we're Stuart and Dave Bell, father and son. I'm Stuart, founder of Alive Church and the Ground Level Network of Churches.
And I'm Dave, a worship leader and songwriter, and together we're launching Church Chat, a space where we can talk openly about church, family, and life from two generations of experience.
We've seen the good, the bad, and the downright interesting. And while we certainly don't have all the answers, we've learned a few valuable lessons along the way.
So why not join us now for heartfelt, faith-filled conversations designed to encourage you, challenge you, and hopefully help you on your own journey. Well, welcome back. This is number 3 in this new little series, Church Chat, a father and son's perspective of church, life, family, all of those type of things. So let's do a quick recap on these 5 levels of leadership that we've come up with. So the first episode, in case you missed it, it was talking about career or calling. And I noticed over your life, there's been a couple of opportunities that have been presented to you. And I suppose the outcome, the choice that you made in those moments determined whether, I suppose, you went into this next level. And career or calling was to do with you knocking down a wall in the home, allowing more people in. An amazing story. Level 2 was character and commitment, talking about all of those essentials being the same off the platform as on the platform, husband, dad, all of those great stories. But today, going to be a good one. I think it's going to be a good one.
Sure.
Now, level 3, I've come up with this based on your life, and there is another moment where you were presented an opportunity, and I believe you made the right choice in what was actually could have been quite a difficult decision to make. But this is to do with now at level 3, does this become competition or does it become kingdom? Competition or kingdom. But before we go into that, I thought it would be appropriate. Now, when we ended our last episode, we came out of the studio and we received a text message we kind of knew was probably coming, but it was a very sad message for us to both receive. We've had a long-standing family friend in America who's played a huge role in our life, and we had the sad news that they had passed away just moments after we actually mentioned his name in our previous episode. So we thought it would be fitting, and I think Pete's going to throw a photo on now. Just as we start this session, we do a little bit of a tribute to our good friend Paul Milligan, who's played a huge part in my life, certainly for me and Sarah. So we had the honour and privilege of literally this week going over to Dallas. It was quite the adventure. We were there for 24 hours.
You would pick a snowstorm, wouldn't you, to
yes,
travel?
And we got the last plane out. But we had the honour of being there in person to attend a Thanksgiving service for Paul. And many people will know him, a lot of people won't, but Paul was, I suppose, a bit of a mentor figure in my life for me and Sarah. And when you look back for Paul and Patsy, his wife, and obviously I've now become really great friends with Paul's son, Andy, and his wife, Jess, really, really special relationship that was certainly a God-given thing for me. And Paul has been in my life at some really significant moments. And I remember the first time when Dwayne came over here and we did, they used to call it camp meeting back in the day. And I got the opportunity to play electric guitar in the band. And it was very close to us when we'd just had the all clear from the doctors, the nurses, and so Paul and a number of American friends who we're still really friendly with today were there to experience a celebration moment, really, for me when we declared to the church the all clear bells are ringing.
Yeah, I mean, Paul and Patsy, they were very generous, weren't they, towards us? We've known them, actually, for quite a considerable period of time. Paul's been over and sort of taken part in Swanwick Conference. He's been into our local fellowship and was usually known for business, wasn't he? And so did some great teaching on kingdom economics, business, and I know he encouraged you, didn't he, with regard to finance and really spoke prophetically into your life.
Yeah.
But also then when you needed some help, he he came by you and has been really faithful in, opening doors you would never have been able to have gone through, which has brought you into a place of health and blessing. So we do want to honour Paul today. We actually did watch, Irene and I watched the funeral, online. It was quite a moving experience.
It was. And I remember a couple of things that stand out for me and Sarah. We were in our first year of marriage, which will be 19 years ago. Really? I believe. So I think it was 2007. We attended a conference, newlyweds, and it might have been a couple of years after, actually. And Paul was one of the first people to give me quite a significant prophecy. But one of the things he said over our marriage was quite interesting. He said, you won't experience some of the issues that married couples experience, and said a lot of stuff about the security of mine and Sarah's relationship. And at this point, we were still unsure in the natural as to whether children would be part of our story because of, what's been through my body at such a young age. And it was almost like a little prophetic moment there, just speaking into that. And then we found out probably a couple of months later that Sarah was pregnant with Jackson, our first miracle baby.
Well, Paul was very much a man of faith, wasn't he? And I remember you went over there and he had a special interest at the time for Jackson, didn't he?
Yeah.
And that was quite a nice connection.
And I remember, obviously, you being a major role model in my life. And when it comes to, when you're struggling or you have some difficulties, we would often chat. But I remember one time I just got on the phone and rang Paul because it was one of those relationships. And it was one of those things where I was like, I feel the call of God on my life for ministry. I've got some entrepreneurial ideas. I had a bit of an identity crisis as to what I was meant to be doing. And Paul was amazing, wasn't he? He just offered for us to spend time with him, and we spent time with his team in Colorado. And he really kind of, I suppose, put things in place and really endorsed what I was doing. And that's kind of like what I'm doing today now is a result of our times with Paul.
Was able to carry both ministry and business very easily, wasn't he? So he would often be preaching on platforms, used to lead worship himself, didn't he?
Yeah.
But also a great business model as well.
Yeah. And for us, it's been a really special relationship because a lot of these people who have achieved significantly when it comes to business, you don't often find a character that is generous without strings attached, totally interested in you as a person, not just what you can bring to the table. And I remember Paul invited me into a little meeting once, and there was 4 or 5 people in there, and he had just been given the task of opening a business school at a really large, well-known Bible college across the world. And I have no qualifications in that realm whatsoever, but he invited me into the conversation when there's business people in there. He's like, hey, Dave, what do you think we should do? What do you think? And it was a little sign that he was just a highly relational person that would bring you into the conversation even when you're not really qualified to do so.
It was interesting, actually, that I perhaps got to know Paul in his last period of time more than before, in that we had a little bit of communication over the whole issue of suffering.
Yeah.
Paul, in his last months, perhaps for a year or longer even, really suffered physically. And of course, grappling with, why should I be suffering? I am a man of faith. And of course, he was a man of faith. But in his latter months, he started to recognize that there was actually the presence of God was very strong in his periods of suffering.
Yeah.
And he actually contacted me, sent me 1 or 2 of his laments. He wrote some psalms, questioning things, talking to God with lament. And that was really interesting because for most of his life, faith, healing, miracles, part of his story and teaching, and he never gave up on that, of course. but also wrote this systematic theology of suffering, where he made the claim that he got to know God more personally in those times. And I think that blend of both faith, believing in the power of God, healing, miracles, etc., but also understanding the suffering element. Of course, Christ, the suffering servant. And of course, you've known something of that story as well. You've known the healing power of God, but there was a fair amount of suffering through that. And for us as parents, the same. Yeah. So we do honour Paul today and pray for Patsy, of course, and for the church there, because they will miss Paul's input greatly, won't they?
Yeah, I suppose there's so much we could say. Most of my stories with Paul, because Paul obviously had quite a crazy sense of humour, as well as being an accomplished entrepreneur and businessman, and most of my stories with Paul I probably can't share.
No, I would imagine.
As Mum once said, they may cross the line at some stages.
And humorous.
And I've never seen this line, so I don't know where it is or when I've crossed it. So I'm going to leave those stories just between Paul and I. But yeah, we honour Paul today and we thank for his life. So it's great.
We do.
Great. So we're going to look at this next level, which is to do with competition or kingdom. And I suppose that's a choice that the leader has to make. And we're going to get to a moment. So obviously, one of the things we talked about was the knocking down of the wall in level 1. But then in this particular level, competition or kingdom, there was another opportunity presented, and it was, I believe, your response that resulted in the things that came, and that's to do with a phone call. But we'll pick back up on that. So I know that church unity has been like one of your major things when it comes to you as a leader. I think it will go down as Stuart was known for being a man that pushed for church unity.
Hopefully, and certainly if you were to ask I would imagine all church leaders, kingdom or competition, they'd all shout kingdom.
Of course.
But the issues are, how does that work out practically? And, how is this going to influence not only the world around, but how is it going to affect and impact my life?
Yeah.
So I would say when I first started studying the Bible, and of course my parents pushed me into Bible study from a young age. And I remember reading Psalm 133, how good and pleasant it is when brothers and sisters dwell together in unity. And then there are two pictures. One is of oil, which is a symbol of the Holy Spirit, and the other is dew, this refreshing of the Holy Spirit. And I personally believe that the missing ingredient often across cities and regions is this unity across all of the denominations and churches. And if the world looks at us, I guess they would say they can't agree with themselves. There's schisms, broken relationships, and some believe this, some believe that.
Yeah.
And we were never meant to be cloned, and, there's a diversity in God's kingdom. But certainly there should be the foundational issues of faith we should all believe.
Yeah.
And we should want one another's success. Now, when we get into church leadership, of course, we want our bit of that kingdom to succeed.
Yeah.
We don't want people to leave us. We want to gather people. And when I, was in early years, just to get people through the door and keep them was important. And so in that process, sometimes you can become a bit possessive. These are my people, when of course they never were my people. They're God's people. However, relationships were very important to us. So the building of local churches, I think, is fundamental, very important. And so unity within a single church is quite a challenge.
Sure.
Because I don't know if you know this, Dave, but people fall out.
Never noticed.
And they disagree over all kinds of things. I remember years and years ago, I went to a little fellowship in Devon, and it was a small place. And I was really impressed because on their notice board, they had 2 Bible studies, one on a Wednesday night
Wow.
and one on a Thursday. And I thought this must be a really spiritual place.
Yeah, very.
Until I found out that Wednesday night was Authorised Version and Thursday was, I think it was New International Version.
So they had to have two groups to keep
because
people
they
happy.
could not agree. So there'd be a handful at each of those meetings. And I guess both
Which one
very
would you have gone to?
Well, I'm an NIV person still.
Yeah.
Though I think a good leader will look into all translations and,
Yes.
of course, Message and other Bibles help us, don't they, to think a bit outside of the box. I was brought up, of course, on Authorised Version.
Right.
Which my dad, we were into the Authorised Version. I had to learn Authorised Version. In those days, you had to learn a certain number of texts a day.
Really?
We've got out of that habit partly because there are so many translations. So it was these and thous and begets and begots and all of that.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. And I think that brings us to a moment. So I believe we were called a live church at the time. Yeah. And we were probably meeting in a number of locations at this point. So a live church now, doing really well. Mm-hmm. Currently 6 locations, about to launch into our 7th location, which is really exciting to see like what God's done over the years, from a living room knocking a wall down to a church touching the region, really.
And to remember what we said last time, because there's unity in the roots of 2 churches, you remember, came together, Evangel Church, Lincoln Free Church. And so I was the instigator of Lincoln Free Church, but others, of course, were involved in that story of unity. Yeah. So even the bringing of 2 churches together, I think there was in our hearts the desire not just to do our own thing, but to join together for the greater purposes of the kingdom. Yeah. And I think we've mentioned that was not as easy as we thought. No. So I think that was true in the early days of ministry. Yeah.
So you're sat in your office, and for people that don't know anything about Lincoln, so basically our building is in the heart of Lincoln city centre. Yeah. That was important. Some amazing things happened back in the day where the building was condemned and we had to kind of go out of the building for a season. Mm-hmm. We went back in, renovated, all those type of things. The university came to Lincoln. Some amazing stories. And so we are literally, people may say, a stone's throw from the university. So
you have to have a good throw, but you would say that.
Yeah, a good throw, but close. Yeah, close. So you're sat in your office, which is opposite the church, and you have a bit of a view across the city.
Yeah.
It's not very grand. I mean, it's not like a skyline. There's a couple of buildings and stuff. Yeah. But I suppose maybe 500, 600 yards down, there's another church, which looks quite similar to ours, got a spire, steeple, that type of thing. And I remember the phone rang, and this was a moment in time, I think, when in my brain, as I've been processing some of these church leadership type things, this was an opportunity presented to you. And the phone rang, and it was the famous Nicky Gumbel on the other end of the phone. And that's amazing, because Nicky, and he's just an incredible guy. What a legacy, and the amount of things that he's done in the UK is just phenomenal.
Irene and I had known Nicky and been honoured to be a part of a little group that met each year in Richmond. And guess what we called it? The Richmond Group. And
Very good.
We knew Nicky and obviously respected him. And on that particular day, the phone rang.
Yes.
And he said, we've been invited by the Bishop of Lincoln to plant an HTB plant into the city of Lincoln. Yes. And I wanted to chat to you about it, see what you felt.
Sure.
So I said, well, what's the name of the church building that, of interest? And so Nicky said, well, it's St. Swithin's. So I kind of inwardly laughed, because I'm looking at the spire from
You can see both churches.
I can see both churches outside my window. And so I said, oh, that's interesting, Nicky. I'm looking at it now.
Yeah.
To which he said, oh, well, if it's that close, perhaps we ought to not get involved.
Sure.
And I found myself saying, oh, no, there's plenty of room in the city. The more churches, the better, because I believe that to be the truth.
Yes.
but then began to think a little bit of the potential implications. Because as you can imagine, we've been going for a number of years in Lincoln, have done very well. Years. But you know how it is when something new comes into the city, especially with the worship from HTB and good children's work, youth work, those kind of things, began to think, there will be implications with this. But I think on that day, I made the right call. I said to Nikki, not only should you come, but we will do our best to support you and help you.
Yeah. There's a couple of things picking up on that. First of all, I think the way that Nikki did this was the right way, in the sense that I hear stories where there's no consultation and somebody just moves into the area. I think for him to almost ask permission.
Brilliant. That was brilliant.
It was amazing.
And genuinely would have done something else, potentially. Yeah. But we were on the same page with that because I think we knew we could work together for the gospel in the city. But journeying that is a slightly different matter. What we did say was that we would aim to send some leaders.
Well, that was my next point.
Right.
Because, the kingdom is an upside down kingdom, isn't it? Usually what we feel in the natural that we would want to do often isn't the kingdom way. But what I was impressed with was not only did you say, Nikki, we welcome you to this great city of Lincoln, not only can I see our two buildings actually in the same landscape, they're pretty close to each other, but we're going to stand with you and partner with you. Not only that, but we're going to send 3 couples from our own location to go and support you as you start.
It worked really well because one of those couples, the gentleman, had been an Anglican vicar.
Yeah.
Had been in the RAF and a chaplain and so on, and was with us.
Yeah.
But, his roots were Anglican and he was a good leader. And so it was an obvious ask, would he and his wife like to go? And then there were 2 other couples, a young couple that really had a burden to lead, a quality couple. And then the 3rd couple I'd known for a long period of time. And they were trusted people, and I knew they would love another new opportunity, etc. So the 6 went.
Yeah.
Really interesting that the younger couple are now leading another church in another part of the country, which is fantastic, really.
Now these issues can often be a little bit challenging to talk about because obviously there is, as much as this whole process sounds fantastic, there's obviously some things that would go on that sometimes make these things a little bit more difficult. And I suppose for people that kind of, to put it into perspective, it's like if you're in business, you've set up a shop in Lincoln, which is kind of family run, homegrown. You've been there from the start and you've built this and had a bit of a reputation and stuff. And then the big franchise announces that they're going to move in a couple of doors down the road. Now, competition obviously is something that we don't want to have in the kingdom. But as you've said, there's a hurting world out there in need of hope and in need of change. And obviously God's master plan is doing that through his church. So I think it's amazing that even though it could have been a bit daunting for you, because we know when the new thing's in town, it's going to attract. How was it for you in terms of then that moving forward?
Well, firstly, I perhaps ought to say that Nikki was very kind and very thankful for our response. And Irene and I were actually at one of HTB's gatherings in the Royal Albert Hall.
I was there too.
Heard my name called out as someone who'd been a blessing. And I thought that was nice. Very kind.
Yeah.
And so what I think often happens at leadership level, that unity thing is understood to some measure, though we all have our perhaps styles and ways of doing things. But it's sometimes with certain people in congregations who there may be some on the edge or some that are a little bit disgruntled with certain things in a church.
Yeah.
When a new opportunity arises,
Yes.
it's quite easy, if you like, to lose one or two people, and that is what happened. We didn't. There wasn't a big, number that left. But we invited actually the leader of St. Swithin's to come to a Sunday morning, prayed for him and his wife, and prayed for St. Swithin's. And actually, I said to the church, I said, they're coming to reach the lost, not to
rearrange the saints.
Yeah, to get, people from other churches. And you know how this is. Everybody smiles and nods. And I said, please don't just think this is something new because they want to give their attention to reaching new people, not to just get a bunch of Christians from the churches around the area. But of course, the inevitable happened. As a pastor, you think, well, everybody will be listening to my wise counsel.
I would have thought so.
But the inevitable happened. A number did leave.
Yes.
Some did it properly. There is a right way of doing things. And you mentioned that for church planting. But there's also a right way of leaving a church as well. Yeah. Because, for some people, they said, we feel that this would be more suitable for us. Yeah. We've benefited from being in your church, but we feel there's a new challenge. That's a lot easier to deal with than people that just one day they're with you, the next they've gone. Yeah. And the harder thing would be the handful of people that were saying, "Oh, this church is better than Alive," and so that's where that competition comes in. So I would restate that usually that's not found at leadership level. It can be, because leaders can think we're the best church and etc. But it often comes through people that don't always understand these things. Yeah. What I have learned from research is that usually when there's a new church plant into a city or town, if they're next to even a church that's struggling, usually both prosper. Yeah. Because I think there's something really good about kingdom thinking. Yeah. So there are more people that are followers of Christ because I made that decision, or we together made that decision because the leadership had to back that. There are more people that have found faith because St. Swithin's have arrived. And the other interesting thing is certainly since COVID, there's a certain type of person that has connected gladly there, often because of being brought up in Anglican churches, wanting to find a good, lively Anglican church. Yeah. There it is, ready, made for them. Yeah. But there are also other students, people fresh in the city that are looking for our kind of church. And so if you go to both congregations, I think we would say both churches are prospering, doing well. And often younger people don't have those kind of divisions. So good attitudes towards one another with the students and young adults. I think they find it easier to follow through with this unity message.
It's an amazing story.
It's a great story, I think. And
trying to work out what I would have done.
Well, the issue is sometimes you just have to make the right call.
You do.
And then process the weaker sides of your character. Yeah. Where, we are going to lose people. Of course. Things are going to be said. There could be some hard work ahead. And often with these things, you have to measure the success or otherwise, a number of years later. So this is quite a while ago. Yeah. And measuring it today, I would say we're all prospering, flourishing, and where possible, working together.
Amazing story. Amazing story. The answering of a phone call and your response. Unbelievable. Well, obviously, Unity Church stuff is a big part of you, and that's modelled really well by an event that you started a number of years ago. I believe we touched on it in one of the other episodes, but it'd be great to hear some of the stories about what was Grapevine, later the One event, and then finally Awaken. It's had a few name changes.
It has, yeah, but it's been going a long time.
It has.
And sometimes you do need to refresh things.
And I think that you actually told the story about when you started and the kind of 1,000 people showed up. But if we were to bring it a bit more, some of the current day, the event has been going how many years now? 40 odd?
Oh, it's longer than 40 now.
Wow.
It's about 40.
And so this is an annual event that you and Mum started 82, somewhere around
82,
there.
yeah.
And it is a gathering for the church to come for a weekend. It was predominantly for the network of churches that you started from the Humber to the Wash, which is a region east in the UK. It's obviously now become a bigger event where people all over the country come. And back in the day when you started that, you were probably only one of a handful of those type of events.
3 or 4 festivals at the time.
And now there's
23, 4.
Yeah, there's a lot of,
even more.
A lot of choice.
Yeah,
people.
little choice, which is great.
But so yeah, we've got some.
Of course, Dave.
Yes.
Talking of competition, there are others, he said provocatively.
Yeah.
That have put festivals on the same weekend as ours.
Oh, that feels like that's
there's a little bit of thing in me there.
Oh,
you know, so the competition kingdom thing works all the way through, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I think there are 3 events on the August bank holiday.
I would go for 4.
Weekend. 4, I think. Yeah. And there, I do think protocols matter.
Yeah.
And I think that there should be space with 52 weeks in a year.
Yes.
For us all to space out a bit. But that's
a side note.
That's
a personal opinion.
Because could I say this?
You can say what you like.
Competition is not always. We always view that negatively.
Sure.
But the truth is, if you have 4 events on one weekend, people have to make their choices.
Yes.
And people can make their choices at other times, but they could go to, 2 or 3.
Yeah.
And we're finding people that have been long-standing with us.
Yes.
Again, we're back to the latest shiny thing. Can pull some people.
Yeah.
But these are all challenges and good fun.
They are good fun. So Grapevine, some incredible memories. Obviously, I'm thinking of even a Martin Smith when you called him out of. So Martin at the time was just a recording engineer, had written a couple of songs, and he was in the back one time just recording the worship, and you called him out and said, "Martin, if you're out there, I want you." It
may have been Chris Bowater that called him onto the platform.
Sure,
but I do remember the moment. And can you remember the song?
I think it was "Thank You for Saving Me." I
think it possibly was, but then, of course, he and later Delirious, came a number of
years,
they? Amazing. And again, these festivals give that kind of opportunity and opening, don't they? And, but the festival concept in itself, certainly from our point of view, yes, it was our network of churches can be together.
Yeah.
But I think for most festivals, there's that bigger picture of kingdom.
Yeah.
So we would be looked at as a sort of a charismatic event, particular style of worship and so on. But we would have a breadth of interested church people who weren't part of ground level.
Yeah.
Perhaps more from outside of the network came. It was a great place for people that were in established churches to kind of re-emphasize their faith. And I think as we look back, we had so many baptized in the Holy Spirit, opportunity for prayer that you can't always get in a local church.
Yeah.
It's as though Grapevine, one event, Awaken, lifted the volume for people. And I often come across people who had an encounter with God. Even this last week, a 60-year-old man came and thanked me.
Wow.
That when he was, and this scares me somewhat, when he was in the young people's group, being impacted.
Yeah. We hear those stories all the time, don't we? People called into ministry, now pastors of churches.
Many of them, actually.
There's been some amazing stories of Grapevine over the years. If I'd mention a few things, there was a wedding there one year.
Yes.
It's a bit weird.
There was one, that will
be the only one.
The only one.
Tornadoes,
hopefully that's the only one as well.
Obviously the big year when the stands collapsed.
Yeah, that was the hardest of years because
that was 2004.
Yeah, because the site was filled with ambulances and there were 23 people injured, I believe, but no deaths because people, even on the news, it did hit the news, national news, that estimated deaths.
Yeah.
But there were no deaths.
And some people see leadership as, it'd be nice to be the leader of a big event like that, but a lot of people don't see the cost of leadership sometimes when you're thrust into a world with solicitors having to read out statements and having to shoulder and carry the weight when, big tops don't arrive on time. The weather's forecast is awful. Random tornado whirlwinds whipping through the site. People think it'd be nice to lead something like that.
But that event you mentioned, because the media were very interested, I had a volunteer of a European lawyer who was in one of our churches who came and sat at the side of me, and he had a little bit of a, if I kick you, say no comment. And some of that was very difficult because everybody wants to say how sad they are and sorry that this has happened, but you then get into legal implications and all the rest. If there's one thing I've been very happy to hand on the leadership of, it would be the event. Still will be going. But the difference between being a punter or even a part of a team in an event like that and being the bottom line, carrying the responsibilities, chalk and cheese. This is how I would feel. Certainly August was out for me because it would be like a weight. On my shoulders, but particularly after we had one or two of those big issues. Because I think when we started, we trust in the Lord, everything will be okay. But then when on site, a child gets lost, or there's some kind of tragedy. Irene and I went to the hospital to visit people that were injured, and family members that weren't Christians were not happy to see us. All those kind of things that you don't ask for. And, you just assume everybody will think you're doing your best and so on. So that was a big, big burden. Not that I carried all of that. We had administrative people, finance people, etc. But there is no doubt I was the bottom line in terms of weight.
And alongside that, there's been so much good. I think mid-2000s, it reached about 13,000 people across the weekend. And the stories are countless from people whose lives have been changed and impacted. Not even, for me, it was the highlight of the year. And also I got engaged.
Oh, yes.
To Sarah
I actually remember
at the event.
Parties there. To come back to the unity message, I remember one of the last, when we came to the year before, I think, closing Grapevine and then opening one event. Oh, no, it may have been in one event, actually. It gets a bit dull, doesn't it?
A bit blurry
blurry as you look back. But I remember across all of the festivals, and I think that year there were 22, 23 of them. A scroll was taken round from starting in Spring Harvest right the way through to the prayer gathering of the Nigerian church after us. We were towards the end of the year with August Bank Holiday. But a scroll was taken and all the leaders of the events put a thumbprint on and we had this little moment of unity. I remember Steve Clifford, who at the time was Evangelical Alliance, came and we had this little service where the last festival handed the baton almost to the next festival and we did the same. So that for me was a conclusion, I think, of something that we profoundly felt a festival should be. Unity, carried across the nation for the sake of the kingdom.
The event obviously still goes on. I've heard the worship there is exceptional.
It's exceptional.
A friend told me that.
Yeah.
But apart from that, you are also involved in a couple of other Unity things. Now you've transitioned out of the leadership of the network and the senior leadership of Alive. Mm-hmm. So tell us about PFI, Partners for Influence.
Well, Partners for Influence was a number of us got together. Firstly, actually, this was a little national gathering. My friend Jack Robleski from Pennsylvania, and at the time, Francois van Niekerk in South Africa, the three of us got together and talked about, connecting again for the sake of the kingdom and unity. And so we worked into America. They worked into England and South Africa, etc. And that little group expanded somewhat. And 5 or 6 of us. And I remember in the early days of that, we actually planted a church together. So the gifts and resources of South Africa, so we planted into Cameroon. So the knowledge for mission and planting was found in South Africa. But we also took the expertise from the Americans and from the Brits to go and plant that church. And in fact, I remember Dan Hargreaves went with a view for the younger generation on behalf of Ground Level. And also we financed the three teams financed the planting of that church. And last year we had a visit. One of our speakers came from Africa, and I asked, how's that Cameroon church doing now? And thankfully, years on, it's grown, it's blossomed.
Amazing.
And it now connects into, a network of African churches.
Amazing.
Which is great.
Well, I reckon we've probably talked enough on this one. This whole area of choosing kingdom over competition. And I think that's been highlighted really well by some of the decisions you've made. And obviously, one of the hallmarks of your ministry is church unity.
Can I just add one thing?
I will allow.
Because obviously, when we first church planted, I came out of the Methodist Church.
You did.
And for some years, really, I always felt that though we were following, we believe, the instruction of the Holy Spirit, it also felt as though we'd done something that doesn't look like unity. We'd done something outside of the existing structures. Now I've got an answer for that. I believe we would have loved to have done it within the Methodist Church, etc. But there was another narrative, and that narrative meant that Methodists, I think, for a period would perhaps have seen us as the black sheep of the family, and why did you desert the Methodist Church? But we believe that there was a call on our lives for a new kind of church, non-religious Christianity, vibrant faith, and sometimes the church, not just the Methodist Church, but many churches had compromised the gospel, and we just felt there was need for something new. But for a long time, I did carry that sense of that doesn't feel quite right.
Yeah.
Many years later, because I can say that now, but many years later, the president of the Methodist Church, who I had known when he had been in Lincoln, out of the blue contacted me and said, would I be willing to share at the Methodist Conference in Westminster? So I said, what have you got in mind? And he said, I'd like you to do a very short thing on why I left the Methodist Church. Ooh. Now, at first, I'm thinking, do I really want to do that? Because it felt as though I was going to be in the firing line. And I said, well, what do you need? And he'd got someone else, Billy Kennedy from Pioneer. 2 of us were invited to share. And what I didn't know was, when I say conference, I think of Grapevine type of conference. Think more TUC. Because Trade Union Congress.
Right.
Because there was a red light and a green light. Your green light goes on. When the red light comes on, you stop speaking because your time's up.
Okay. We could do with some of those in church.
I think that would be a good thing to do.
Yeah.
But I did my thing, and I decided I'd have to write it out, and so that because I knew I could be quoted.
Yes.
And so I wrote the thing out. It was very short, and I thought I'll start with a bit of a provocative comment. And I started with the words, "The best thing I ever did was to leave the Methodist Church."
Wow.
But then I went on to say, however, the way that I did that and the lack of communication, I've got an opportunity to say we didn't do well and asked for some forgiveness, and then went into the positive elements of we believe that we were following the Lord in that.
Wow.
After I'd finished, and I didn't know this was going to happen, the floor was opened, and there were, lots of Methodist ministers there.
Right.
Floors opened, and they had to... X number were allowed to make a comment in return.
Oh, wow.
So I'm very nervous over that. The first person was a lady who was not known for charismatic persuasions, who I had been warned would not be very happy,
right,
etc. She was very warm, very kind.
That's great.
Didn't say anything harmful at all. And I think there were about a dozen people commented.
Yeah.
Every one of those until, well, there were 12, I think. 11 of them were really quite positive, some very positive. Some saying, we really bless what you've done, and you must not think you've let the church down. Really kind things.
Yeah.
But there was one lady who was quite...
Was it Mum?
No, it wasn't. She was there. And there was one lady who was not happy at all.
Right.
And said so.
Sure.
So after...
Take the 12.
Yeah, after I said to Irene, we've done pretty well, actually. But we prayed a little prayer together and said it would be rather nice if we could meet this person after.
Really?
After the meeting. Anyway, meeting finishes, we go to a coffee shop, and who should walk in but this particular person?
Amazing.
And so I went up and said, I'm really sorry you've been hurt. Can I chat with you about it? But the amazing thing was this. She said, well, I was put down publicly by a charismatic leader. They were rude to me. They said women shouldn't be speaking. And she said, I've carried that for a long period of time, and I've found charismatic Christians to be, arrogant. And she was very honest and open with me. But obviously, because it was personal, she was more conversational. And so I said, would you mind telling me what happened? And she named the person that had publicly done that. I said, this is really interesting. I said, that same person gave me a rough time in a particular meeting and said something. I was getting up to speak at a conference, and from the floor, this voice was, who do you think you are?
Wow.
And thankfully, I felt okay and said, that's a good question. And I introduced myself. Yeah. But of course was hurt by it. But it was the same person who had done to her what he had done to me. Amazing. So I said to her, the issue isn't charismatic. The issue is we were both impacted by a rude person. Yeah. And we hugged.
Yeah. And if people like and subscribe to this, we'll let them know the name.
I'm not sure about that.
No, I don't even.
But nevertheless, we hugged.
Yes.
And
wow.
I talked about weight coming off my shoulders with the handing on of grape. I think a weight came off my shoulders with regard to the Methodist roots we had.
I think if we were to break this down simply, if you do the right thing, it always works out in the end. That's the story of your life.
Hopefully, not always made the right calls, but on those we've talked about, I think I'm pleased I made those calls.
That's great. I think we'll end it there.
Yeah.